Great. So we're live on Facebook, and I'm going to open up the webinar so folks can join in the webinar. So welcome folks, as you are logging in, we will start in about a minute to give folks some time. Okay, so we're going to get started. Welcome folks to our presentation tonight with Dr. Erim Gomez on the amphibians and reptiles of the Wenatchee Valley. I'm going to start off tonight by reading a land acknowledgement that Wenatchee River Institute put together with the Piscosa people, the indigenous peoples of the Wenatchee Valley. So the land Wenatchee River Institute sits on is the ancestral homelands of the Shimpishquashu, Piscosa, or Wenatchee people. The Shimpishquashu, meaning people in between, had villages positioned along the Wenatchee River. Their ancestral homeland extends from the Cascade Ridge throughout what is now known as the Wenatchee and Okanagan Valleys. The culture and economy of the Piscosa people centered on fishing. They also gathered roots and berries, basket-making materials, and medicines. They also hunted game. The Piscosa are named within the Yakima Treaty of 1855. Language to establish the Wenatchee Reservation was never followed through, even with the needed surveying completed. Many Piscosa now live on the Colville Reservation, 150 miles northeast of Leavenworth. The Piscosa people are still alive today. They continue to practice their culture within their homelands and are working to get land back within their homelands. The Piscosa people are the original stewards of this land. And we offer this land acknowledgement as the first step to amplifying Indigenous voices and recognizing the harm done to them as a people. We encourage all to learn about the Indigenous peoples of the place you now call home. So welcome everybody. Today is the first day of the 19th annual Leavenworth Spring Bird Fest, and super excited to have this presentation tonight as part of Bird Fest. And I'm Rachel Bishop. I'm the Community Programs Manager at Wenatchee River Institute, and we are an environmental learning center in Leavenworth, Washington. And our mission is to connect people, communities, and the natural world. And we do that through youth programs and community programs. And I wanted to just take a few minutes to just explain some upcoming programs that folks might be interested in. And I'm not going to explain all of the upcoming programs we have. So if you're interested in learning more about what's coming, you can head to our website, which is WenatcheeRiverInstitute.org, and look at our calendar. You can follow us on social media, and you can sign up for our e-newsletter, which goes out bi-monthly. So this Saturday is our keynote speaker for BirdFest, and anyone and everyone can tune into that. It's set up similarly to this presentation as a webinar and also broadcast live on Facebook. And our keynote is named Dennis Paulson, and he's going to be presenting on the wonderful adaptations of birds, and that's at 7 p.m. on Saturday. And on the 18th, which is next Tuesday, also at 7 p.m., it's a virtual event highlighting a project that's happening in the Wenatchee Valley, and it's put on by all women. It's called the Brave Space Film Project, and they're working on a film right now called Expedition Reclamation. And its focus and mission is to redefine what it means to be outdoorsy and who belongs in the outdoors. And it's 12 women characters, Black, Indigenous, and women of color, and 2 producers who are also women. And 6 of the 12 characters are living in the Wenatchee Valley currently, and both co-producers are as well. So it's a great project happening in our backyard. It's an opportunity for you all to learn about the project, their mission, why it's important, how you can support it, and when the film's going to come out. And lastly, we have an event on the 26th of May, and this is all about the new Recreation Ambassador event or program that's happening in Leavenworth, recognizing that a lot of our trailheads and river take-in or put-ins and takeouts are seeing lots and lots of impact by people. So there's this new program where nonprofits and their volunteers are stationed at different trailheads and river access points, trying to educate folks on what's going on with their impact and how they can reduce it, and maybe other places they can go to reduce their impact at those specific places. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can tune into that event. And the Leavenworth Chamber of Commerce is spearheading that program. Okay, so tonight, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them throughout the event. If you're watching via Facebook, you can type your questions into the comments. And if you're watching via Zoom webinar, you can type them into the Q&A or through the chat, and we will answer the questions at the end of Dr. Gomez's presentation. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce our speaker for tonight. Dr. Gomez holds a master's and PhD from Washington State University. He is an assistant professor of wildlife biology at the University of Montana. Dr. Gomez's research interests include the conservation of endangered species, the ecology and sustainability of freshwater ecosystems, and amphibians and freshwater fish. Dr. Erim is a first-generation college graduate and proud of his parents' farm, working, and immigrant roots. He is devoted to encouraging students from underrepresented groups to pursue higher education, particularly in the sciences. In his spare time, he loves to hike beautiful Western Montana, take photos of wildlife, float rivers, and Latin dance. So, thank you, Erim, for being here tonight, and let me know when you want me to share my screen.
Thank you, Rachel. And you can put up the screen, and I'll just chat for a second while that gets going. So I'm here right now in my office at the University of Montana. We are on the ancestral homelands of the Chehalis and Kalispel people here. The Chehalis, that might surprise some people, were historically, or not historically, were long ago a coastal people, but some of the Chehalis decided to come inland. Supposedly the story is they got tired of the rain. So we have we're on the ancestral land of the Chehalis and Kalispel people. I think Wenatchee is a gorgeous, beautiful place. I've driven through, I've hung out, have friends live in the area. I've spent a decent amount of time there. And I lived in the state of Washington for about 13 years. I'm only recently a resident of Montana. I have a teaching and research Instagram. For those that do that, you are welcome to follow it. It's just Erim Gomez, PhD. Oh, I was going to click it. You can go next. Rachel's managing the slides for us today because for some reason, even though I've literally used Zoom hundreds of times, if not more over the last year, the computer doesn't want to share my slides for some reason. What we're going to talk about today is amphibians and reptiles. I know, right? The only birds we're talking about today are the ones that I have here on my Guayabera. So they wanted to spice it up a little bit, talk about, critters that we don't always think about when it comes to conservation. As a matter of fact, in the United States, when we spend money on conservation, it's birds and mammals. The vast majority of conservation is birds and mammals, followed by reptiles, amphibians, fish, reptiles, amphibians, and then plants and insects are much further down the line. And even with fish, it's generally game fish, right? Fish that we're interested in fishing. So we'll also talk about the identification of reptiles and amphibians in the area. I'm not going to say that it's all inclusive, but this is the most recent data that we have about what amphibians we have. There might have been some amphibians there that are historically that are no longer there, but this is that information as of the last few years. I'll tell you a little bit about their natural history and a little bit about how we can conserve them. Herpetology. Herpetology is the study of amphibians and reptiles. It has a very unfortunate name, but it comes from the Greek word herpetron, which means creeping animal, and logia, which is just knowledge, like the study of. People that are interested in reptiles and amphibians, whether from conservation or whether they do research or whether they like having amphibians at home, are called herpers. Now, I do have 2 amphibians, but they were saved because they were going to get euthanized. I don't consider them pets. I consider them my roommates. The act of going out and searching for frogs and salamanders and reptiles and turtles and snakes is called herping, kind of like birding, right? The difference is, though, oftentimes you can get a lot closer to our animals than you all can. You hear them in the distance, that counts. That barely counts for us. We like to actually see them. We actually like, even when we're doing research on them, we can more easily collect data on them, measure them, collect them, age them, sex them, depending, what kind of research that we're doing. There is a movement in the herpetological community. Oh, go ahead. There is a movement in the herpetological community to, not handle amphibians so much, so just trying to take photos at a distance, which isn't actually, for a lot of amphibians, isn't that hard to do. As long as you're not right on top of them, you're usually okay. With certain snakes, oftentimes, if you don't know what you're dealing with, you want to have some distance anyways. Amphibians. So this is, I do most of my work with is amphibians. A couple nights ago, I was looking for western toads. Tomorrow night, I'll be looking for some western toads. Amphibians evolved 370 million years ago. In the Wenatchee Valley, there are 11 species of amphibians, maybe more than you would have expected, definitely more than I expected. And it's because the Wenatchee Valley you have some arid areas and you have some areas that get a lot more precipitation. You have elevation changes, right? So in that area, you actually have a bunch of different types of smaller ecosystems. And they get different amount of rain. There are different temperatures that have different type of plant life. So you actually have a decent amount of amphibian diversity. One thing that makes amphibians different than, say, reptiles is that most amphibians lay their eggs in water, and their eggs, if you look at them, they look like a clear gelatin. They don't have a white surrounding like bird egg shells do, or reptile eggs do. Anurans is kind of the technical name for amphibians. They evolved 265 million years ago, so a little bit later than the first amphibians, salamanders, which we'll talk about. People always ask me this question. This is the biggest question I get asked. Are frogs toads or toads frogs? Frogs So Anurans are frogs, but toads themselves, toads are just a kind of frog. So all toads are frogs, but not all frogs are toads. One interesting thing, evolutionarily speaking about them, is that they have really complex locomotion. That means the movement, right? They what we call saltatory. They jump. And in the fossil record, we've had a hard time trying to figure out what something that looked like a salamander, the first evolved as amphibian, and something that looks like an amphibian. There's a few, but not as much as we'd like. And part of that is probably because their bones are relatively thin. And so we don't have as many samples as we would like. Now, the most common amphibian you'd probably find across actually the Pacific Northwest would be the Pacific forest frog, sometimes called the Pacific tree frog. Pretty abundant. They're terrestrial. They are the frog that when you hear ribbit, the reason people even say ribbit is because that's the frog that people think about. It is that common, right? If you ever look at a movie, 9 times out of 10, you hear frogs calling. Doesn't matter where the movie's supposedly at. You're going to hear our native Pacific forest frog calling. One way to tell whether it's a Pacific forest frog is that they have a unique, or they have this black band that goes from kind of the tip of their snout all the way down their eyes, across their eyes, and down their jaw. There's different colorations, greens, browns. There's even one, I've never seen one bright blue morph that's the color of my shirt, but that's in Northern California. If you want to hear what they sound like, so you know, Rachel will, yes, click it. So we'll listen to it for a second. One male calling, male background. So what happens, the males are the ones that call. They're trying to attract a mate, and what'll happen is one will start calling and the other will start calling. One question that I want to answer one day that I haven't been able to answer is, why are males calling way past the time that females are no longer in the wetland anymore? Because these are terrestrial amphibians. They don't really hang out in the wetland. They might be near, you might find them more commonly in marshes or the sides of the wetlands, but you can also find them, far decently away as the wetlands. I would suspect some of you found these maybe in your house, under pots and, in the backyard or something like that, under plywood and boards. Next slide. The Cascades frog. So this as you can imagine, it's found in the Cascade regions. It looks really similar to a spotted frog. And this is one, when I was a student, I would have had a hard time figuring out the difference between a Cascade frog and a spotted frog. Cascade frogs have spots, but not as many. I know, so easy to tell the difference. If you look at this frog, you'll notice that it only has like a few spots on its back, right? They're highly aquatic. They live at higher elevations than other amphibian frogs in the area. Now let's move it to the one that almost looks exactly like it. The Columbia spotted frog. Now, do you see why it's called a spot? So many more spots, right? Okay, it's kind of hard to tell, right? But it is. It's one of those things where you kind of look at it, right? It's like, oh, this only has a few spots. Oh, this one has like a dozen spots. That's the difference, right? There's a lot of research going on this species of amphibian. We have this one out here where I live here in Montana. Cool thing about this frog, the Columbia spotted frog, is that they are communal breeders. So one male will hang out in an area, start calling in an area that they think that's a good place to lay the eggs, and the female will go there, and they will mate. And what will happen is other females will actually attach their eggs to the same egg mass. So we're looking at here probably like 20 different egg masses, each one that can have hundreds to thousands of different eggs. And let's hit the sound. They're really hard to record. Yep, sounds like a bird. It wasn't the bird at the end, but it does sound like a bird, right? Let's go to the next slide. The American bullfrog. Now, this frog is actually not native west the Rockies. So from where I live, because I still live on the west side of the Rockies, it's not native here, although we have it. It has been spread pretty much to every state in the lower 48. It's pretty ubiquitous. It is a generalist, highly aquatic. It spends most of its life in or near a wetland. It's not going to be tromping around much unless it's moving to a different wetland, right? It's not going to go tromp around for foraging. It might tromp around during the wet season to get to a different area. They can go up to, believe it or not, in Arizona, they document them traveling 10 kilometers. Their larvae, unlike other amphibian larvae, which normally when they hatch, they metamorph into adults in a year, these larvae can stay in their larva form for 3 years and get really large, as you can see. And they eat native amphibians and they outcompete native amphibians. So not only do they eat them, they can do a better job of eating the food and resources around them. So one thing that we don't want people to do, and one thing we can all do, is not introduce them. One way to know whether it's a bullfrog or not, they have that big round side on next to their ear or next to their eye. That's actually kind of their ear, their equivalent to their ear tympanum membrane. Let's hear what an adult frog sounds like on the left. Yeah, and let's sound what a juvenile sounds like. This is you pause it. So the juvenile makes that noise. Sometimes they're a little bit higher pitched. They make that noise when they're scared or see a predator or jump. We don't know why. We don't know if they're doing it to alert us, like, so, hey, we know we see you, or are they doing it to alert their siblings, right? Because they probably have hundreds of siblings or a bunch of siblings in the area. That's one way to protect their gene pool potentially, right? Or maybe it's a combination of both or something. Oops, I got too excited. I love my job. Let's go next slide. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about toads, and I want to remind everyone here, you're all going to be evangelists for talking about how the difference between frogs and toads, and actually not the difference, right? Or you're going to say now, and you'll know that all toads are frogs, right? And contrary to what my mom always tells me, they do not give you warts. What you see on them is they're actually what we think of as warts are glands that sometimes excrete toxins. The ones that we have out here, you don't have to worry about. I mean, I wouldn't eat any of the toads we have out here or lick them, but you know, we had a student. We were doing research, and we sometimes put toads in bags while we're measuring them to keep them separated for just a few minutes at a time. And I had a student that was putting their lips right on the bag, made her to make your lips tingle. So don't do that. As the only reason you would need to wash your hands is just to get some of that toxin off you. And again, they're okay to catch and hold. Just wash your hands afterwards. Next one. So the western toad. This is probably the common toad that you'll see out there. I've seen it in the region. Late summer, you'll see a bunch of juveniles jumping around. They're really distinct because you can see the warts, right? You can see their big gland by their eye, and they have a distinct yellow band. They do not kill people, but they do make dogs sick, so don't let your dogs eat them. They're really cool. And actually, I don't know, I must have forgot to put the sound on here. Next time I'll do that, but it actually sounds like a bird chirp. When I first heard them, I actually thought it was a bird. This is my favorite amphibian or toad. I love this guy. This is a photo I took on the top right. It's called I don't know why it's western toad. Oh, that should be spadefoot toad. Sorry about that. That's a spadefoot toad. It's called spadefoot because if you look at its foot, you see this dark little kind of shovel part component. It actually used that to dig. I've seen them dig within a minute on hard pan soil. They spend the day underground, okay? We don't have many of these in the agricultural lands anymore. Why? Well, we till the land. And we've been tilling the land for about 140 years, or longer in some places, 150, 160 years. And we've diminished their habitat, and where we're finding them is more natural areas or in areas along agricultural areas where we haven't actually tilled in a while. There was I don't know if I guess an accidental experiment or just a natural experiment or a natural experiment where there was this land that was not being used for agriculture. And we were finding thousands, tens of thousands of these individuals. And after it got converted back to agriculture, we were finding them in the hundreds, right? And so that, it was an example of, it's one study, right? And science need more than one, but it was an example of what we would have expected to happen. They do produce toxins, but not nearly as strong as the Western toad. People barely even ever mention it. I just mentioned it just to be aware of it. So they are decreasing in population. So let's click on the sound, the call right there. Aren't they adorable? So again, just what spadefoot toad, not Western toad. The long-toed salamander. It's called the long-toed salamander because look at its hind leg. See that massive toe? Its scientific name is actually Ambystoma, which is called the mole salamander, and macrodactylum, macro being large, dactylum meaning digit. They're terrestrial or maybe subterranean, right? Usually find them under logs and stuff like that. They'll occupy a lot of the same areas that the Pacific forest frog does. They do actually make a little burp, but we don't know if that's a purposeful vocalization or just gas. Yes, animals have gas. It's just burping. Some of the research I'm doing is examining how climate change is affecting this particular species. Climate change is decreasing the size of certain wetlands, making wetlands dry up sooner, decreasing the number of wetlands that we have. And the research that I have so far suggests that we're going to start seeing smaller and smaller long-toed salamanders, which means that we'll probably start seeing fewer salamanders because females, when they're bigger, produce more eggs. When they're smaller, produce fewer eggs. That's one I caught from the other night. This was like 2 nights ago here. Oh, the rough-skinned newt. Should I say this? I expect you all that you're all going to care about this individual, okay? But this, believe it or not, is the most poisonous vertebrate we got in the Pacific Northwest. It produces the same toxin that pufferfish does. Now that explains why when I was a kid in Oregon holding them and then I touched my mouth, they would all tingle. I didn't know that. They have a very distinct smell. And no one has died since the 1970s. And the one documentation we do have was someone ate one in a dare in the 1970s. That's the only known case that we had someone die of this. Our people try to correct me, or Dr. Gomez, that's not a salamander, that's a newt. Actually, newts are salamanders. Newts are actually the only salamander in the salamander family that we even have in the region. So it's the truest of salamanders, if you really want to look at this that way. But we find them in the Cascades and the Gopher range. There is a population in very far western Idaho that we think was introduced because it's only found along the Cascades or near the Cascades, except for that one individual population. So if you handle these guys, you're welcome to handle them. but you know, just wash your hands after, don't let your dogs eat them. Very rarely they'll do this kind of this movement here where they curl up, they'll show their bright orange colors saying, hey, don't eat me. You know, I'm poisonous. Poisonous because it excretes. It's not venomous. Venomous is it when it injects, you know, it bites you and injects into you. So these guys are poisonous. This is called the Unken response. I've only ever seen it once, and I've held these guys hundreds, if not thousands of times. It's more common with other newt species. Next slide. So ones that you may encounter in the region, not the tiger salamander, probably further as you go further into central Washington, and you probably find them in larva form, are tiger salamanders. Tiger not because of their blotches, but because they're very voracious predators. And some videos on my Instagram about in their aquatic form eating. And then an awesome, beautiful giant salamander. You can find this in the Cascades. They might be in larva form, so that means they look like a giant, you know, or what do you call it, mud puppy, for those that might know what those look like. And you find them in drier areas. When they're in terrestrial form like this, it has to be pretty moist environments because they breathe through their skin. Don't touch the giant salamanders because you can harm them. Since they do a lot of breathing through their skin, you don't want to touch them. You can end up, you know, essentially hurting what they use as lungs. So what do you want to do if you want to protect amphibians? Well, don't spread bullfrogs, right? Teach people what bullfrogs are. Stop introducing native fish, bluegills, crappies, pumpkin seeds, bass, grass carp, and I did this. I did this as a kid. Actually, the worst of all fish you can introduce is the goldfish. Yep. Next slide, or click it one more time. So don't introduce goldfish. Don't be like middle school Erim that introduced goldfish into this frog pond. In my research, the biggest factor of whether I was finding fish or whether I was finding amphibians is whether there's goldfish in a wetland. The moment there's goldfish, I am not seeing productive amphibian breeding. You might find adults, you might even find eggs, but you're not going to find larvae. And so it's pretty common for people to throw these in their ponds. So don't do it. Learn from Gomez's mistake. Next slide. Now we're going to talk about reptiles. They do not have an aquatic larva stage. They evolved 312 million years ago. They do have a white egg sac, a true egg sac. Some of them, though, do give birth, not common. Some reptiles do give birth to live young. Turtles. There is sadly, you know, before I get into that, turtles often get confused with amphibians. They're amphibious because they like hanging out in water, right? But they're not amphibians, they're reptiles. They're different taxa, a different evolutionary group. There's no known native species in Wenatchee, at least in recent history. There's one native species west of the Cascades called the pond turtle, the western pond turtle. It's endangered. It's not as colorful as some of the more common turtles you'll see in the park. So if you see a turtle that looks pretty bland, good chance it's actually a western pond turtle if you're west of the Cascades. And we continue to see these guys declining. Part of it is because we're introducing non-native turtles into their environments. Next slide. Western painted turtles, which you'll commonly see in ponds, public parks, and stuff like that. They are native to far eastern Washington, but not past central or the Cascades region, or even far western Washington. They're omnivorous. They're very colorful, bright. Females can live, if they take 2 to 5 years to reach sexual maturity, and they can live 50 years. So introducing these individuals can be pretty bad for the western pond turtles in their native environment. They are, one of the distinctions is that bright orange coloration and then the yellow marks on their head. And the next turtle, red-eared sliders, because they have that red distinct coloration. If you see that red, you know it's a red-eared slider. It's also not non-native, introduced in the same areas that western pond turtles are at. Common in the pet trade. Its rostrum or bottom of its shell isn't as colorful. These individuals can live 30 years. Next slide. Snapping turtles, which have been documented at a few different ponds in the Wenatchee Valley. Don't want to be sticking your hands in underwater holes because they will bite off fingers and toes. Not very common. So if you do happen to see one, call the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife so no one loses a toe. They can live 100 years, can weigh 100 pounds. I mean, they're like this big, right? They'd love to munch on our native amphibians. So, not to be scared. This says if you see these, don't approach it. Just contact the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. Excellent. We have 6 native lizard and amphibians, and this kind of their order of occurrence. Northern alligator lizard versus western fence lizard, followed by western skink, pygmy short nose lizards, which are adorable. They look like little dinosaurs. The common side blotched lizard, and then I can't see which one the one on the common side blotched lizard. And the whiptail. We'll go next. So western skink, they have very soft scales. They're thought to be pretty common, but elusive. You'd have to pick up things to see them. Don't pick these guys up because you look at them the wrong way and they'll drop their tail. I'm not joking. I mean, you approach them and they will drop their tail and the tail will start squirming. And they do that as a way to say, hey, I'd rather lose my tail than lose my body or my head. They're active during their day. So, but again, big thing to do to protect these guys if you ever see them is just don't handle them. The western fence lizard, or fence lizard, just sometimes called, we've seen decreased populations, but it's more common than, it's one of the more common, probably the second most common lizard that you would have in the region. In Spanish, they're called lagartijas, which I think is hilarious because that's what we call push-ups. We do this because they're doing push-ups. Now we don't know, we know that they do push-ups to scare their males, but it's been observed that they're doing it also what appears to be humans. They're like, hey, bro, this is my land. We're not 100% sure. There's a hypothesis that maybe there's another male that we don't see. I like to think that they're doing it. Like saying, hey, get out of my territory. And so, cool fact that I learned today writing this was that their blood kills Lyme bacteria. So when a tick, which often gets so attached to these guys, especially around the ears, and suck blood, the blood of the fence lizard kills the Lyme disease bacteria. So where you find these lizards, you find a decreased presence of Lyme disease. Another reason to protect reptiles. Go. So yeah, that's just showing the coloration pattern of a male. A female wouldn't be as brightly colored. Males are much more brightly colored than the male. So when they do the push-ups, you can see that coloration. The sagebrush, that was the lizard at the bottom. Hard to kind of tell the difference between them, but unless you're in really arid environments, you're probably looking at the western fence lizard. There is one way if you're able to catch them. If you click the next click, it'll show a photo here. So if you end up catching them, you can see that the fence lizard has kind of much more brighter orange coloration along its legs, and that the common sagebrush lizard has a black coloration around its legs. Just because it's called a sagebrush lizard doesn't mean it's just found in sagebrush, but it's more likely to be in drier areas. Click to add title. I forgot to add the title. Oops, it didn't save. That's what I'm going to say. It didn't save. This is the alligator lizard. They're very smooth Some people think they look like alligators. You know, I guess kind of the head looks like an alligator. They do bite. If you do grab them, just be aware they do bite. They're carnivorous. We actually don't know all that much about them. I was surprised trying to find information. I was only finding like paragraphs of information about these guys. So there's opportunities to do research on the northern alligator lizard. The northern alligator lizard. Next slide. The pygmy shorthorn lizard, they are adorable. That's someone's hand, and you can see the baby on top of it. They got that little fat, chubby tail. A bunch of horned lizards have the horns that come out much larger. You can barely see these guys. When I was a kid, we had the coastal horned lizard, which had bigger horns. And I don't care what my parents said, that thing was a dinosaur. Okay, I know it wasn't, but like I really wanted to believe it was a dinosaur. They look like dinosaurs. They blend in really hard. I studied not this species, but another species in California, the endangered flat-tailed horned lizard, which have much larger horns and a much fatter tail. And in 6 weeks of studying them, I found two. Probably one of the reasons they're endangered. They mostly, pygmy, or actually horned lizards generally eat mostly ants. They're ant specialists. Have you ever noticed things that eat ants are typically ant specialists? Because the vast majority of other animals cannot eat ants because they're really bitter. This has a side benefit in that if let's say a coyote or raccoon or possum or something like that comes along, finds one of these, tries to bite it and taste some of its blood, it tastes really bitter. So it has a benefit of acting as also, you know, a deterrent, maybe not for that individual, but for the population. Next slide. The common side blotched lizard, the kind of the bluish coloration, looked a little bit more, you know, iguana-ish, you know, kind of what we think about that when we think of an iguana. They have a black spot on their side, you know, yay big, you know, their body is yay big, tail can be a little longer. There are different, I guess you could call morphs of these individuals, same species, but morphs. They have different colorations and they behave differently. So for the males, there's an orange-throated male that's ultra dominant, super aggressive, just tries to scare out any males from its territory. The blue-throated male will also be aggressive, but not as aggressive and dominant as the orange-throated male, and the yellow-throated male, aptly named, sneaks in to find a mate, you know, tries to hide away from it and sneak to enter the territory of the two above males. And we see some of this similar behavior in the females that have somewhat of the same colorations, not as bright, but some of the same coloration. So really cool example, you know, of different behavior and morphology together, right? Happening in your own backyard. Snakes, there are 9 species of snakes. Okay, I get that a lot of people don't like snakes. I understand that. The reason I created my research and teaching Instagram was because my friends said, Erim, you need to keep your wildlife photos like on another Instagram so we don't always see those icky stuff. And I'm like, and then of course they follow me on that and complain that I post amphibians and reptiles on that thing. I'm like, well, you can just unfollow. So if you do follow me, just know you might see scary insects and snakes. So there's 9 species of snakes. Snakes eat pests. They eat insects. They eat, you know, mice that we might not want. There's only 1 species of venomous snake. And I had to share this to embarrass my mom. Click the next slide. This is a photo I got. This is a text I got from my mom. Mom. She told me not to touch snakes. Okay. And because, you know, I don't know what kind of snakes they could be. Even though I have a bachelor's and master's, a PhD, and teaching one of the top wildlife biology programs in the country, mom's still worried. This is a common garter snake, by the way. Next slide. Gopher snakes. Gopher snakes, this is the one that gets confused with rattlesnakes. the way you know the difference, first of all, if you see one that looks like a rattlesnake, just don't approach it. Just walk away, just don't, but if you want to know, how to distinguish the difference, if you can see its tail, that's one way, but you can't always see its tail, right? There's no rattles. But it has a unique black, dark band that grows across its face and under its eyes, right? So it's a distinct dark band. They can grow 1 meter long. Some people call them bull snakes, gopher snakes, because they eat gophers and they eat things that are rodents. They're non-venomous. They will try to act like rattlesnakes. They'll even like wag their tail and leaves, try to make a rattle sound. They can live for 30 years. Next slide. Oh yeah, that's a photo, just showing you that coloration pattern. Now the rattlesnake. So you can see that it's moving its rattle. Now, it does have a band, right? But its head shape is more diamond shaped and the band is lighter coloration. I don't think you would confuse that for a black coloration, right? This is our only species of venomous snakes. Venomous because they inject poison, right? Do not handle these guys. Don't worry about, if they're in your home, which is or in your garden or something, which is highly, highly unlikely. I know a gentleman out of Central Washington University, and he does research on these, and he has a hard time finding them. No one in the state of Washington has died from a rattlesnake bite since 1999, and previous to that, it only been a few, I think, since the 1970s. And most hospitals have anti-venom, right? And within you get that anti-venom and you're pretty much fine as long as you get it relatively quickly, within a couple hours or so. If we have hobbyist herpers here, people are enthusiastic, how do you know if it's not under a rock or something? Well, I'm going to show you actually. So let's imagine that this right here is a rock, right? This thing is rock. The way you would pick it up is you would, I should have practiced this before. The way you would pick it up is that you would lift from the front and you'd be on the back of it, of the rock or log, right? You don't want to pick it up in the front because then you're putting your face and your nose there. So pick up a log or rock backwards. Please don't harm them. Next slide. Just some, just so you can kind of see side-by-side comparisons, right? You can see that the gopher snake's head is much more slender than the triangle shape, right? The rattle snake has obviously the rattle, and then the coloration pattern difference, right? You can also sometimes see like the nostrils, the larger nostrils on the rattlesnake. Now, we could do a whole weekend-long seminar on the coloration differences of garter snakes. And they get really creative with their names, as you can see. The Western garter snake, the common garter snake, and the Northwestern garter snake. Yes, I want to talk to the gentleman that named these individuals. So just so you know, so the top right is a Western garter snake, the bottom right is so the bottom left is a common garter snake, the bottom right is a Northwestern garter snake. There are so many different varieties of these individuals. The way you know it's a garter snake is because it has a distinct line going through the top of its body. All garter snakes have that distinct line. That's how you know it's a garter snake. Believe it or not, I'd much rather be next to a rattlesnake than even touch these individuals. And the reason I don't like touching these individuals is because they defecate on you and it smells so bad. I mean, not as bad as skunks, but I mean, once you get it on you, I mean, you can wash your hands and it literally seeps, the molecules seep into your skin and then it reeks, doesn't do anything bad to you, it just reeks really bad. So I don't touch them, kids do it, kids touch them all the time. It's a very effective defense mechanism. So we have 3 different species in in the Wenatchee Valley. There's more species in the state of Washington. Racer, so this bluish coloration snake, has this, this blue hue, yellow bottom, relatively soft to the touch, often found near water, non-venomous. It will try to vibrate its tail too, like the gopher snake, to kind of scare potential predators away. And they can grow about 1 meter or so. Next slide. The northern rubber boa. It looks like a giant worm, right? Yep, it looks like a giant worm. It's short and thick, just like me. Yep. It curls up as a defense mechanism, and it hides its head. If you look how it's the one photo on the bottom, its head is kind of at the bottom of its body, and it's putting its tail up top. And almost every individual I've ever found in the wild has multiple scars on its blunt tail, because they'll actually wave that around, hoping that because mice will try to attack them, birds will try to attack them, raccoons will try to attack them, and it's better for a predator to bite or snip off part of their tail than to lose their heads. I've had many of college students bring me these. Oh my God, it's hurt! Look at his tail. I'm like, oh, this is pretty common. So if you see one that's hurt, unless it's really hurt, then I would just leave it alone. It's pretty common for them to have wounds at the end of their tail. The northern night slate, which I can't remember they keep on changing the scientific name of this individual. I've actually never seen this guy. I am friends with the northern night snake scientist, Dr. Robert Weaver, and it's pretty hard to detect. They only come out at night. We don't know all that much about them. We do know that they eat other snakes, which is kind of cool, right? We do know that they eat lizards and also amphibians, which is pretty common, but them eating snakes is pretty interesting for snakes in the Pacific Northwest. The sharp-tailed snake is small. Usually the ones I find are really small, but they can grow bigger. I've never seen one bigger than about 6 inches or so. They're really slender. Often, sometimes people think they're worms. They will curl up their tail, show orange, maybe as far as I know, they're not venomous, but it's a kind of a way to scare things off. They really love eating slug and sluggies. One interesting thing about ecology, there's this principle in ecology that no organism can occupy the same niche. That means that each organism has to use resources slightly differently. They don't use them identically. And oftentimes, there's been times where we think organisms are using resources identically, then we spend time studying, and we realize even though they eat the same food, potentially they eat at a different time or different size, during a different season, right, or in a different area. And so this is, one of those strong principles in biology, niche partitioning, the niche theory. So we want to protect reptiles. First, don't kill them off, right? I let them be, educate others, plant native plants, right? That's always good. That's good for pollinators. That's good for birds. Think about not having a lawn and maybe having a more natural yard, where you have natural shrubs, you have natural trees, you have natural vegetation. Use less herbicides and pesticides, and that's good for everything. That's good for the environment, that's good for human health, that's good for fish, that's good for birds, right? Next slide. So people ask me often, why do you care about these things? I mean, what's the matter? And I'll ask you this. Think about this. Have you ever seen the Mona Lisa? Some of you may have even seen it in person. Most of you probably have not seen it in person. I even if I go to the Louvre in France, I don't know if I'll waste time to go look at it, right? I'll go look at other things. But it would sadden me if I found out that the Mona Lisa was burnt, right? And that's a human creation that's only 400 years old. These organisms evolved from bacteria billions of years ago. They've survived, their lineage or their ancestors survived 5 mass extinctions, right? they evolved from vertebrates hundreds of millions of years ago, right? And I think when you put it like that, if we're willing to save art and protect art, we should be willing to save and protect biodiversity. And we can all do that bare minimum by educating ourselves and educating others around us. Next slide. Thank you very much. Research is often fun, but it's kind of messy. If it's going smoothly, you're probably doing it wrong. Again, you're welcome to follow me on my Instagram at Erim Go PhD. And I have time, I hope, for some questions. Yes, I do.
Thank you, Erim. Yes, so let's see, we have.
So yeah, oh, Sam, one of my students. Hey, Sam.
Oh, great.
Sam, how long do several years, in the wild, probably, 4 to 6 years. In captivity, they could probably live a little bit longer. They are a little bit more long-lived than our native species. Again, another reason that they're so good at spreading. The one thing that's probably keeping them from spreading in some locations is lack of connectivity between wetlands and then our relatively cool or cold winters, because they have to spend the time in the water, so they're not going to be moving around all that much.
Sweet. Okay, so we had a couple other questions coming in. So some folks, may not want to hurt rattlesnakes, but they may want to move the rattlesnakes. I think there's been some people have talked about how maybe even moving them is harmful, introducing them to an area that's away from where they're currently living. And I mean, I don't know if you know.
I would recommend, that you call the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife if you find one. Even me, right? If I'm a homeowner, assuming that I don't live out in kind of that where you get the urban interface. That urban interface is kind of hard, right? You can move them, but you might have other individuals come back. So contact the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. One way to make sure that they don't hang out in your area, if you don't want them, is don't have anything laying on the ground. Don't have plywoods. If you have plants, put them higher up, kind of on stands. Don't have any boards or laying on the ground, stuff like that. You can by doing that, you'll reduce the likelihood of finding them in your area. As it relates to moving them, I mean, if you're just moving them within the region, that shouldn't be an issue. Again, it shouldn't be you moving them. It should be the state Fish and Wildlife Agency or a local scientist or something like that, someone that has experience handling them.
Yeah, great, thank you. So it sounds like Anne chatted in and asked what the question was, and I think maybe she was talking about Sam's question. So Anne, I'll read it out. Sam was wondering how long bullfrogs can live, and what precautions can people take to avoid spreading bullfrogs from one pond to another. So that's the question.
The biggest, like I mentioned, but the biggest thing is just don't move animals you find in the wild, right? Should never be collecting wild animals and moving them anywhere. That's a big problem, especially with animals that we just kind of name sometimes, like crayfish. That's a big issue with crayfish. Crayfish is crayfish to people, right? But that's not true. There's over 400 known species of crayfish, right? Only 5 native west of the Cascades or west of the Rockies. There's a reason for that. It's an evolutionary reason. But so just don't spread them around. And what else would I say about that? I mean, people do that. It's pretty common for people to spread bullfrogs around. Don't catch tadpoles. If you have a local pond or something like that, make sure that if you're catching them to, show your kids how they develop. That's fine. Make sure you know what species you're grabbing. Ideally, just grab a native species and then release it afterwards, or at least release it in the same area you caught
Okay, so Jenny has a question. What is your favorite amazing adaptation for a reptile or amphibian?
My favorite adaptation. I think it would be the Newt. I think it would be the Newt's toxin, the pufferfish toxin, because we've noticed that with the I think it's common garter snake has evolved to be able to handle the toxicity of the Newt. And so what the Newt has done is continue to get more and more toxic. And so the common garter snake has continued to get more and more resistant to the toxin. So there's this evolutionary arms race, is what we call it in biology, right? Where they're all trying to like, okay, well, I'll produce more toxin, I'll deal with it better, right? And it's not an individual that can deal with it better. Evolution does not happen at the individual level, it happens at the population level. That's a good distinction to make, right? That snake has that ability to deal with that toxin or it doesn't, right? But if it does, then it's more likely to survive, more likely to have more offspring, and then those traits more likely to get passed on to future generations. How distressing is picking up reptiles and amphibians? That's a very good question. Probably not as distressing as like some other animals, them being ectotherms, so them having a lower metabolism probably means they don't stress out quite as much. But I avoid doing it at the same time. There's always that balance between engaging with wildlife and appreciating wildlife. And for the most part, my big story is I just don't touch anything that's venomous, snake, the snake, and then release anything you catch, right? So for the most part, as long as you're not, for most species, as long as you're not hurting them, squeezing them too hard, you're okay in grabbing them. So the exception to that is, the Pacific giant salamander, because you don't want to harm their skin. And there's multiple species on the west side of the state where you also wouldn't want to do that with, because they do the same thing. But with the long-tailed salamanders, I would say encourage your kids to pick them up to hold them if they connects them to nature. It's always a little bit of that balance.
So is it better to wet your hands before you touch animals?
Yes, it's better to wet your hands from the water that they're in. And they will release them. I don't try to, when I'm holding them, I even do research, I don't hold them any longer than I need to. So even though you'll see me photos of them, I'll do it really quick.
Okay, yeah, and then we got another,
how to tell the difference between frog eggs and salamander eggs. Well, you have to do it by species. It's not something that you'll be able to identify, kind of easily identify. One way that you could potentially do it, so they all have this gelatinous clear through gel and then black dot in the middle. That will, the nucleus, not a true nucleus, but we call it a nucleus, where the larva starts developing. If it's been around for a week or two, you'll actually see something that looks like a tadpole and something that looks like a larva salamander inside of it. I can detect the difference. I can tell because I've looked at tens of thousands of these, right? But it might be a little bit harder to tell for you. One way that I would say is that they have very distinct, once they're starting, once a week or two in their development, the salamander larva will start having gills and they'll be a lot bigger. Tadpoles have larvae that have gills too, but they're super tiny. You might not even notice them.
That's cool. Okay, I have a question about rubber boas because I've always found them in the shade or in the forest versus like other reptiles finding them out in the sun, on rocks. So do rubber boas like the shade, and how does that work?
I don't know if it's the shade, but they do like I too have found them in coniferous forests, right? A Douglas fir, ponderosa pine forest. So there obviously some preference to that. Why that would be, you probably have to know a little bit more about their diet and behavior. As you can tell, they would blend in really well in a dark forest, right? There's that brown coloration. When I saw one, I it was like a meter away from me, right before I was walking up to it, right? They're pretty docile, right? So they don't move all that much. So them being able to hide and blend in is probably a pretty important component to their survival.
Yeah, they're
And
so
they'll
cool.
eat insects and stuff like that, and they're probably going through brush and stuff and down logs to be able to eat that stuff.
Yeah, and then we actually found a sharp-tailed snake at the Wenatchee River Institute property with students. We were doing a bug hunt and lifted up a stump, and it was under there curled up. Yeah, real small.
Yeah, they're normally really small. I mean, they can grow big, but I've never seen one. Maybe in captivity,
Yeah, super.
I have noticed. I looked this up and I couldn't find it. They will curl up their tail sometimes and push on your skin, and it doesn't feel great. I mean, it doesn't hurt, but it doesn't feel great. And I don't know if that is actually a defense mechanism or not. One of the cool things about doing research on non-game animals is that there's so much more research to do, right? Hundreds of millions of dollars get spent on deer research or understanding deer, not nearly the same amount on these amphibians. There are salamander eggs from on the west side, different salamander species, where we don't actually know what their eggs look like. It's 2020, right? And we haven't been able to discover their eggs and know what they look like yet.
Yeah.
It's also exciting because that means there's opportunity to do that fun kind of research, or what I call natural history research.
Yeah. So, okay, so educating ourselves, we're attending this and learning. Are there field guides or resources that you recommend for folks?
The Lone Pine makes the best amphibian and reptile book. They have one for amphibians and they have one for reptiles. The Lone Pine publishers, Lone Pine and amphibians and Lone Pine reptiles, you'll find it. They do a really good job of discussing the differences and talking a little bit more of the ecology and doing something that we call field notes, where they kind of just talk about an interaction that they had with that organism, right? And that's something you can do with your children, right? Have them develop their own field notebook where they talk about, where did they find it, what time of day, what time of year, how big was it, was it cold, was it sunny that day, what habitat was it found, did it do something interesting, like the sharp tail, the sharp tail actually pointing its tail into my hand, right? That's interesting behavior. The Uncan response with the northern or the Newt, the rough-skinned Newt. So that's one way to gain further appreciation and learn something about it. I have a friend that's published just on writing little notes and little descriptions about his interactions with amphibians.
That's great. Well, there's folks are saying thank you and great presentation. They've learned a lot. And I also learned a lot. This is really, really great. So thank you so much, Dr. Erim. And I hope folks go out and continue to educate themselves, and no harming reptiles or amphibians, please. And
if you catch, release, right?
Yes.
And where you catch them, and don't introduce goldfish anywhere.
No
Don't be like 12-year-old Dr. Gomez, okay? It's my penance.
Great. Well, thank you. And thanks everybody for tuning in tonight. And I hope everybody has a great evening, and hope to see you at other BirdFest events. Bye.
Ciao.